Hey there, the name's Mark, but my buddies call me Head for reasons I won't get into. I'm a broadcast engineer working at WBDK, a CBS station in Atlanta, Georgia. I've got myself a couple of fancy degrees from MIT, one in electrical engineering and computer science, and another in broadcast technologies. After 22 years in the business, I've held down some tough gigs, and for the last 5 years I've been working here in Atlanta. Before that, I bounced around various TV stations up and down the East Coast. I'm 46 years old, stand about 6 feet 3 inches, and weigh around 190 pounds. Some folks say I'm good-looking, though I don't see myself as any kind of celebrity. I've been married to Lisa for 22 years, or at least, I thought it was a happy marriage. We've got 2 daughters, Michelle, who's married, and Lauren, who's about to graduate from college. Lisa, she's 5 feet 5 inches, weighs around 135 pounds, with long blonde hair. I used to think she was this sweet, kind-hearted woman. Turns out I was dead wrong. These days, she's working as a secretary to the director of a volunteer organization, James Carter, and she's been at it for about 1.5 years now. Last Friday, I figured I'd surprise Lisa by taking her out to lunch. The rain was coming down pretty hard, so I parked near the side entrance of the office, hoping to stay dry. When I walked in, her office was empty. I decided to wait inside, thinking she'd be back soon. That's when I overheard her talking to James in his office. She was all excited about Monday night and gushing about how great it was that I worked the Monday night football games, giving them more time together. Then she mentioned a hotel reservation. James reassured her, saying everything was ready. "I've booked the Whirlpool suite again," he said. "Come over here, and let me show it to you right now." Next thing I know, I hear the rustling of clothes and Lisa's moaning. I stood there, completely frozen. My stomach churned, and the anger hit me like a freight train. I knew if I stayed any longer, I'd do something I'd regret. I wanted to burst in and rip them apart, but I hesitated. The thought of losing control and physically attacking them crossed my mind, and I knew I had to leave before that happened. As much as I wanted to confront them, I couldn't risk the consequences. So I forced myself to walk away. I doubt they even knew I was there. The volunteer organization has cameras at the main entrances, but I came in through the side door, so I stayed off the radar. I was so rattled that there was no way I could focus on work for the rest of the day. I went home to think. Lisa wouldn't be back until after 4 p.m., so I had time to wrap my head around everything. The reality hit me like a brick to the face. Lisa was cheating on me with James, but I wasn't the type to just let it slide. I needed to know how deep this betrayal went. Some people might avoid digging into these things, but not me. I wanted the full truth, ugly as it was. I needed to understand why this happened in what I thought was a solid marriage. Clearly, Lisa saw things differently. She wasn't the sweet woman I thought she was. And now I was determined to find out how long this had been going on and to make sure they both faced the consequences. When I got home, I made myself a pot of coffee and headed out to the patio, hoping some fresh air might help clear my mind. I'll admit, I broke down and cried that afternoon. I know I don't own Lisa or her body, but it crushed me to think she was with another man, especially after we made those vows on our wedding day. Some folks might not take those promises seriously, but I did. And I thought she did too. Being cheated on doesn't just mess with your heart. It messes with everything you believed about that person. It's like the ground beneath you gives way, and all that trust you had in them gone. You think they've always got your back, but then you realize they don't, and suddenly you feel completely vulnerable. Even at 6 feet 3 inches and 190 pounds, I felt like a scared little kid. That's what betrayal does to you. As I sat there trying to stay calm, it hit me. There had been warning signs before, things I shrugged off because I trusted her. Little things that didn't seem like much at the time but now made my stomach turn. How could I have been so blind? It was because I trusted her, and she shattered that trust. I needed answers. Cold, hard facts. Why did this happen? How long had it been going on? Where else had they been sneaking around? Was there anyone else involved? My trust was destroyed, and I wasn't going to stop until I uncovered the truth. By 3 p.m., I knew I couldn't look at Lisa without giving away what I knew. So I left the house before she got back. I drove into town, stopped by the station to grab a few things, and asked my boss for some time off, saying I had personal issues. He agreed, and after that, I headed over to my buddy David's place to cool off. Around 5 p.m., I called Lisa to let her know I wouldn't be home for dinner. Her voice had an edge to it. She was annoyed. She made a snide remark about feeling all affectionate and how I was missing out. I told her to hold on to that mood for me and promised I'd make it up to her. She shot back, "Don't count on it, mister. If you think you can just blow me off, you won't be getting anything for a while." In my head, I thought, good, that's exactly what I want. I got home around 10:30, a bit tipsy but not drunk enough to miss the fact that the bedroom door was locked. I knocked to see if she was still up, though I doubted it. I laughed to myself and yelled, "Fine. If this is how you want it, don't expect any affection from me either. Deal with it." Then I headed to the spare bedroom to crash. The next morning, I got up and found her sitting at the kitchen table with her coffee. The moment she saw me, her mood took an even darker turn. If I hadn't already known Lisa was cheating, her demeanor at breakfast would have given it away. She barely looked at me, and something was clearly off. I smiled at her, trying to keep things casual. "No need to make breakfast, honey. I'll grab something on the way to the golf course," I said, pretending like everything was fine. I headed to the garage, tossed my golf clubs in the trunk, and drove off. Not long after, my phone started buzzing. Of course, it was Lisa calling. I ignored it. A few minutes later, a voicemail notification popped up. Curious, I listened. It was her, furious, demanding to know how I could just leave like that and telling me to come back immediately. The thing is, I had no plans to actually go golfing. I just needed an excuse to get away and handle what I had planned. My real destination was the volunteer organization. I arrived early, knowing the place would be empty, and it was. Using Lisa's work key, I let myself in and went straight to the offices. I was there to set up some remote cameras and microphones in both her office and James's. I wanted to catch them in the act, or at least hear what was really going on behind closed doors. It didn't take long to hide the tiny cameras and mics. I stashed the transmitter behind some old hymnals in a supply closet across the hall. I rigged the receiver in my car's electrical system, so I could tune in on their conversations whenever they were in the building. I wasn't expecting them to do much at the volunteer organization, but I figured I'd gather enough dirt over the next few days to piece it all together. Once the setup was done, I snooped around Lisa's desk, hoping to find something that might confirm my suspicions. I didn't turn up anything too interesting, but I did notice a big asterisk on her calendar for Monday, the same Monday she'd mentioned during that conversation I overheard. That was enough to make me stay on alert for whatever might happen that day. Next, I checked out James's office. At first, I found nothing incriminating, but just as I was about to give up, I got an idea. It felt ironic, given that I was in a volunteer organization, but I started searching through his filing cabinets for receipts. Sure enough, there they were, hotel receipts from the place in Roswell. Some dated back to late 2023, and a few were from spring 2024. I quickly made copies, putting everything back just the way I found it. By then, I knew I was pushing my luck, so I got out of there fast. My next stop was the golf course. I parked in my usual spot and headed for the clubhouse. I wanted to make sure a few people saw me, just to cover my tracks. I ordered a Sprite and found a quiet table in the back where I could sit for a while. As I sipped my drink, I went through the receipts. The ones from 2023 were both on Mondays, and the ones from 2024 lined up with dates when I'd been out of town at CBS conferences in New York. What really boiled my blood, though, was the realization that James had charged those rooms to the volunteer organization. He'd disguised them as conference room rentals. So not only was he sneaking off with my wife, but he was also using my own donations to the volunteer organization to foot the bill. That was the last time they'd get a dime from me. Their day of reckoning was coming, and I just needed a bit more evidence to seal the deal. I was now convinced that this affair had been going on for at least a year, maybe even longer. My gut told me James had his hooks in Lisa before she even started working for him. She used to work as a receptionist at Telfer Corporation, a decent job. But then she jumped at the chance to work for the volunteer organization. It's so close to home, and I'll be working for the volunteer organization, she'd said. Plus, the pay's almost as good as what I was making at Telfer. How could I pass that up? At the time, it all seemed innocent enough, closer to home, working for the volunteer organization, good pay. But now I knew better. She wasn't interested in the job. It was the extra benefits she cared about. It made me sick to think how blind I'd been. The anger gnawed at me, but more than that, it hurt to think my wife, the woman I thought I knew, could betray me like this. I wasn't about to let them get away with it. I went back to my car and hooked up my iPod to the receiver, tuning in to see what I could catch. After a few minutes, I heard James enter his office. He picked up the phone and made a call. I regretted not bugging the phone itself, but I could only hear his side of the conversation. Yes, Lisa, I'm at the volunteer organization. I came as soon as you called. Why don't you tell me what's bothering you? He said. Has he done this before? What do you think set him off this time? He asked. Do you think he's suspicious? Then he laughed. Don't worry. You can get back at him on Monday night. After he hung up, he sat in silence for a moment. I was about to shut down the transmission when I caught him mumbling something. It was barely audible, but I managed to record it. I saved that clip, knowing it might come in handy later. Once I shut everything down, I headed home. It was chilly, so I mowed the lawn to clear my head and did a few chores in the basement. When I finally walked back inside, the tension between Lisa and me was thick. She barely acknowledged me, and I returned the favor. During dinner, we ate in silence. I knew she was trying to get me to talk, but I wasn't in the mood. Finally, she broke the silence. What's going on with you? Why have you been acting so strange? She asked. I reminded her how she'd locked me out of the bedroom the night before and how, every time I went out with friends, she made a scene. I pointed out how she threatened me when I told her I'd be out that night. I wasn't the one causing the problem, she was. Frustrated, she cursed under her breath. Her face flushed with guilt, though she tried to play it off. Eventually, she got up and left the table. I knew that when the truth finally came out, she wouldn't be able to handle it. Later that evening, she walked into the family room while I was watching TV. Her eyes were red and puffy, like she'd been crying. I didn't say anything, and neither did she. The rest of the night passed without much else happening. When it was time for bed, I headed straight for the spare room again. A few minutes later, Lisa showed up in the doorway. What do you want? I asked. Aren't you coming to bed? She asked, her voice softer now. Nope, I replied coldly. You've made it pretty clear there's nothing happening between us for a while, so I might as well get some sleep alone in here. She left the room in tears, but to be honest, I didn't care. Monday morning came, and I left the house without seeing her. She called me later, her voice shaky with tears, apologizing and saying she loved me. I brushed her off, saying we'd talk later. Then I called my boss, letting him know I'd take the day off but would be there for the Monday night football game. He asked how things were going, and I told him things were moving along just as expected. My next stop was the hotel in Roswell. I walked into the lobby, looking like just another maintenance guy. The clerk, a young guy named Mark, barely looked up from his phone. I had a clipboard in hand and played the part. I'm here for a service call on the Whirlpool suite, I said, tapping the fake work order. AC's making a racket. Mark glanced at the clipboard, looking a little confused. I kept my expression serious and professional. Which room? He asked, clearly unsure. I gave him the suite number, and for a moment I thought he'd catch on. But he just shrugged, handed me the key card and said, Make it quick. Once inside, I set down my tool bag. But instead of pulling out wrenches and gauges, I unloaded a kit of high-tech gear, mics, cameras, the works. I might have looked like a maintenance guy, but I was really there to set a trap. Installation was quick and discreet. I made sure to hide the devices so well that they were practically invisible. I was out of that motel room in no time, giving Mark a quick nod on my way out. All set, no more noise from that AC, I said, keeping it casual. He didn't even bother looking up from his screen. I walked out of there feeling like James Bond. Confident Mark was completely oblivious. One more step toward getting to the truth. With some extra time on my hands, I figured I might as well get some important tasks done. I headed straight to the bank and withdrew half the funds from our checking and savings accounts, converting them into cashier's checks. Then I went ahead and canceled our joint credit cards. My next stop was to call my broker and arrange a meeting to separate our investments. I also contacted my attorney to set up an appointment for the divorce and legal matters. By the time I arrived at Planters National Bank in Marietta, I was ready to open new accounts in just my name. I deposited the cashier's checks, making sure everything was secure. I grabbed a quick bite to eat in Marietta, but honestly, I had no appetite. My mind was too focused on what was coming next. After lunch, I met with my broker to finalize the changes to our investment accounts. We split everything evenly without selling off assets, which kept us clear of any tax headaches. I took the paperwork with me, feeling like I had things under control. Next, I met with my attorney to review the divorce papers. I suggested a no-fault divorce with an equal split of assets if she signed quickly. If she refused, I had him include a clause for adultery. I was sure she'd sign, given how cornered she'd be. With all of that set in motion, my only task left was to grab dinner and head to the station for the Monday Night Football broadcast. As I left my attorney's office, I checked my phone and saw several messages from Lisa. She was worried about how I'd been acting lately, begging me to come home before the game. She said she loved me and that it tore her apart to see me like this. Her words dripped with the same false sweetness she'd used to fool me for months. Knowing what I knew now, I couldn't believe I'd ever been so naive. Despite everything, I realized I had one last test to see where we stood. I needed to know if she would show up at that motel tonight. If she did, it would confirm what I already knew, that she had no intention of saving this marriage. Her actions would speak louder than any of her fake declarations of love. At 8 p.m., I activated the broadcast system, putting Monday Night Football in fully automated mode. Then I tuned in to the live feed from the motel room. Right on schedule at 8:15, James walked in and made a call. "Hey baby, I'm here. Come over as soon as you can," he said. And there it was, Lisa's voice on the other end. "Okay, honey, I'll be there in a few minutes," she replied, like it was just another night for them. I could barely keep myself together. The marriage that I had built my life around was crumbling before my eyes. Even though I was ready for this, it still hit me hard. I had known for days, but hearing it from her mouth made it real. The anger and pain only fueled my resolve to bring them both down. I glanced at the list of contacts in my phone and started making some calls, rallying support for what would come next. That took about half an hour, and by then, Lisa had arrived at the motel. I switched my attention back to the video feed. As soon as she walked in, I heard her say, "Oh God, James, being with you excites me so much. I really treasure these nights together." Her voice, the same one that used to tell me she loved me, now sounded sickeningly sweet as she poured herself into him. "James, what a ridiculous nickname. Tonight, darling, I'll fulfill all your desires," he said, and she practically purred in response. "I love it when you talk like that, James. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How had it come to this? And my wife, who I once thought was loving and loyal, now showing a side of herself I never could have imagined." The level of betrayal was beyond anything I could have dreamed. What followed on that bed was something I'll never be able to forget, even though I refuse to describe it. The woman I'd once loved was now a stranger, someone who had crossed a line she could never come back from. By the time it was over, I knew there was no future for us. As much as it hurt, I was laser-focused on my mission to expose them both. If they could see me in that moment, they'd know they were doomed. I was done being the nice guy. I sat through 45 minutes of their filth before deciding I'd seen enough. It was halftime during the game, and I knew exactly what to do. Switching the system to live assist mode, I started playing the recording of James and Lisa from the beginning over the stadium's audio feed. Within minutes, phones were ringing nonstop at the station. I ignored all of them. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed Lisa's number. The ringing echoed through the motel's audio system. I watched as she glanced at her phone and sneered, "It's Head. I'm not answering this time." Let's see how he likes it. She laughed, pleased with herself. I hung up and called again. I suppose I should answer, she said with a sigh, picking up the phone. She greeted me with an icy, hello, her voice dripping with annoyance. Probably curious about what I was up to. Where are you, Lisa? What are you doing? I asked, though I already knew. I went shopping since you didn't call earlier, she said, acting casual. I'm just grabbing some food before heading home. I couldn't help the sarcasm in my voice. Oh, really? Are you shopping right now? I pressed. Yes, and I'm planning to spend a lot of money, too. She snapped back, her irritation growing. Thanks for being such a wonderful wife, Lisa, I said, my voice laced with venom. She bristled, angry at my tone. Don't you dare talk to me like that. What's gotten into you lately? Why are you acting this way? There it was again, that self-righteous attitude. No, Lisa, the problem wasn't me. The problem was the man you were with in that motel room. I watched her as she and James exchanged another round of whispers. I thought about calling again but decided against it. Instead, I dialed the motel's front desk. Mark, it's Head, I said casually. You're not watching Monday Night Football? You should be. Can you ring the Whirlpool suite for me? After just 2 rings, James picked up. Hi, James. Can I speak to Lisa? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I could hear the confusion in her voice as she came on the line. Why are you calling, Head? What's going on? Lisa, it's simple. I know you've been cheating, and I know exactly where you are and what you've been doing. I'm filing for divorce, and you'll soon be out of a place to stay. James isn't getting off easy either. She stammered, completely thrown off. What are you talking about, Head? I can't understand why you're acting so crazy. What's going on with you? I let the weight of the moment settle in before replying. Lisa, the game is over. Turn on Monday Night Football and enjoy the halftime show. Goodbye. And with that, I hung up, ready to bring their world crashing down. I watched the live monitor as Lisa, in a panic, rushed to the TV and switched to Monday Night Football. The moment she saw the video stream of herself and James, she screamed, "Oh my God, no!" The delay in the broadcast meant that by the time she saw it, half of Atlanta had already witnessed the explicit footage. She repeated, "Oh no," over and over as she scrambled to get dressed and flee the room. James wasn't any calmer. He was cursing under his breath, threatening, oblivious to the fact that his words were still being recorded. As soon as they bolted from the room, I turned off the monitors but let the video stream play for 1 more minute. Then, I shut down the live assist mode and switched the system back to full automation. I retrieved the tape, grabbed a few personal items from my desk, and left the broadcast booth, knowing this might be the last time I ever stepped foot there. That night, I headed over to David's, and sure enough, my halftime performance was the main topic at the bar. The reactions were mixed. Some found it shocking, others were furious at the explicit content. But I wasn't there to explain myself. After the game, I called a cab and went home. When I walked in, the house was dark except for the soft glow from the living room. Lisa was sitting there, alone in the shadows. It was clear she had been crying for hours. The phone had been disconnected, probably to stop the flood of calls. I didn't feel any sympathy for her. For me, it was already over. Through her tears, she sobbed, "How could you do this to me, Head? After everything we've been through, after all these years." I stared at her, unmoved. "No, Lisa. The real question is, how could you do this to me? I'm drunk and I'm going to bed. We'll talk tomorrow." Without waiting for a response, I headed to the spare bedroom, leaving her alone in the dark. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache, but Lisa hadn't moved from the sofa. She looked terrible. Her eyes were sunken, with dark circles under them, clearly from a sleepless night. But honestly, I didn't care. She had brought this on herself. I casually walked over to the phone and put it back on the hook. Almost immediately, it started ringing. For the next hour and a half, I took call after call. Family members, friends, volunteer organization acquaintances, everyone had something to say about what they saw during halftime. Even my former boss called. Both of our daughters had seen it, and as hard as it was for them to process, I knew they would eventually get past it. It was Lisa's choices they couldn't understand, not mine. Some people were upset with me for airing our dirty laundry like that, but most understood why I did it. Lisa's parents, however, were horrified. They thought what I had done was cruel, but I had no patience for their judgments. Then came a call from Mrs. James. She asked if I had kept a copy of the entire incident. I assured her I had the tape stored securely and could provide it if necessary. Everyone was weighing in, some angry about the explicit nature of the broadcast, others sympathetic to my side of the story. It was a tough situation, but it was the price I had to pay for exposing the truth. Meanwhile, Lisa stayed on the sofa, crying through the morning, a shell of the woman she used to be. I eventually took the phone off the hook again and went to make some coffee. When I came back, I handed her a cup and placed the divorce papers and investment documents on the table in front of her. "Lisa," I said firmly, "I'm filing for divorce. I know about your affair, and after what I saw last night, there's no way I can stay in this marriage. It's been clear you've been cheating for over a year, maybe longer." I laid out the papers. "Here are the divorce documents. They propose a no-fault divorce and an equal division of assets. I'm giving you until 5 p.m. today to consult with an attorney and sign them. If you don't, I'll file for divorce on the grounds of adultery, and I'll go after everything I can. You know our financial situation, Lisa. I've contributed significantly more than you, and if we go to court, I'll take the lion's share of everything. This is your best option. Don't think you can fight this when the entire city knows what you've done. Everyone has seen the proof." Desperately, she pleaded through her tears. "Head, I love you. I don't want to lose you. Can't we try to work this out?" I shook my head. "You might still love me, Lisa, but love isn't enough. You ended our marriage the moment you chose him over me. That choice was made long ago when you started your affair. Now I suggest you freshen up, talk to your attorney, and think about what you're going to do. Time's running out." Later that afternoon, she returned with the signed documents. "My attorney recommends that I sign these," she said quietly. "He thinks your offer is fair under the circumstances." She hesitated before adding, "Head, can we talk? Can you at least hear me out? Maybe we can work through this. Maybe you can forgive me." I agreed to sit down and listen, though part of me didn't really care about her reasons anymore. I just wanted to hear what she had to say, to understand if this was the first time or if she had been lying to me for years. We sat down at the kitchen table, and she began to explain everything. She finally confessed that there hadn't been any other affairs before this one. But that didn't make it any easier to hear. It had started right before she began working for James. She tried to explain that she didn't fully understand why she'd done it, claiming that she had been happy with me, but something about James had drawn her in. She talked about his charisma and how he made her feel loved. I sat there listening to her, and it was like she was trying to brush off a colossal mistake with a half-hearted "my bad," and a lot of tears, as if that would somehow make it all better. It was pathetic. She kept saying she was sorry, but the damage had already been done. It reminded me of when a dog destroys your favorite pair of shoes and then gives you those sad eyes, thinking you'll just forget it ever happened. Well, tough luck, Lisa. Life doesn't work that way. Apologies don't magically fix betrayal, and no amount of regret could undo what she had done. I acknowledged James's charisma, but I shattered any remaining delusions she had by playing 2 audio clips I had saved. The first one was James muttering on that first day, "That idiot better make sure her husband doesn't find out about our affair." The second was from the motel room just before she arrived. "I'm going to use her tonight. If she gives me any trouble tomorrow, I'll threaten to tell Head. That should keep her in line. I can't risk her husband finding out and blowing everything up." James's slimy voice echoed in the room, his true intentions laid bare. I turned to Lisa, her face as pale as I'd ever seen it. "Not only did you destroy our marriage," I said coldly, "but you were wrong about James. He never loved you. He used you." I didn't stop there. "Lisa, there are 2 reasons we can't stay married. First, you broke the vows we made, and I can't live with that kind of betrayal. Second, even if I could, our marriage will never be the same. I could never make you happy after what you've done, and no matter how much love there might have been, It's not enough to fix the wreckage you've caused. She sat there, sobbing, knowing full well that I was right. In the end, she signed both sets of papers. I told her I'd be moving out to give her time to figure out her next steps. She wouldn't be able to afford the house on her own, and frankly, I didn't want to stay there either. Our agreement stated the house would be sold, with the profits split evenly just like everything else. There were too many memories there. Memories I didn't want to carry with me. I gathered the paperwork and the bags I had packed the day before and left the house without looking back. I dropped off the documents at my broker's office and checked into a hotel for the night. The following morning, I met with my attorney to finalize everything. He agreed to file the divorce papers with the Superior Court that day. During our meeting, we also discussed my situation with the radio station and the FCC. He explained that the FCC could impose civil fines, revoke my broadcasting license, or deny renewal applications. If things went south, I could even face criminal charges, fines, or, worst case, up to 2 years in prison. While my attorney believed jail time was unlikely, he warned me that heavy fines and the end of my broadcasting career were almost certain. And sure enough, the consequences of my actions came fast. In just a few days, I was served legal notices from the FCC, and I had to prepare for multiple court appearances. I won't bore you with the nitty-gritty of the case, but the fine they slapped on me was nearly a year's worth of my salary. It wiped out my savings, and on top of that, my broadcasting license was revoked. I couldn't work in the field for the next 2 years. But not everything was bleak. A former colleague who had watched the Monday Night Football broadcast reached out to me. Despite the questionable legality of my actions, he showed me some compassion, probably because he'd gone through his own messy divorce. He offered me a job, one that complied with the FCC's restrictions. It wasn't what I had planned for my life, but at least it was something. James wasn't so lucky. One day, he confronted me at David's, looking like he was about to throw a punch. I grabbed his arm and stared him down. "Listen, James, I don't ever want to see you or hear from you again. Is that clear?" I said, my voice low but firm. He mumbled something about it being fine with him, but I wasn't finished. "James, I've got a recording of you threatening me. If I take it to the police, I can get a restraining order and probably press assault charges. You could be looking at jail time. Is that what you want?" He shook his head, defeated. "Good. Let this be the last time we ever speak," I added. That was the last I ever saw of him. James lost his job at the volunteer organization. His wife divorced him on grounds of adultery and took him for everything he was worth. Last I heard, he was working at some travel agency in the city, a fitting end for a man who had lived a double life. As for me, I'm moving forward. It hasn't been easy, but I'm finding ways to be happy again. I've dated a few women over the past few months, but I haven't settled into anything serious. I figure when the right one comes along, I'll know. I'm not rushing it. I'm willing to put in the effort to find the right woman this time around. I still run into Lisa now and then. We both attended Lauren's college graduation and Michelle's baby's baptism. I was polite, but I made it clear I wasn't interested in any kind of friendship or relationship with her. It was obvious she wasn't doing well. She looked miserable, emotionally wrecked from the fallout of our marriage. But that wasn't my problem anymore. The pain she caused is something she'll have to live with for the rest of her life. She sacrificed everything for that affair. And for what? In the end, she didn't just lose me. She lost her dignity, too. Everyone in Atlanta knows about her now. Her infamous performance during Monday Night Football made sure of that. Sure, she gets date offers, but to her credit, she turns them down. I guess she's learned that life isn't so simple. But I didn't do this to her. She did it to herself.